This is the story of the Charkhi-Dadri disaster, the deadliest mid-air collision in aviation history. Shymkent International Airport, Kazakhstan. It's early afternoon, and on the ramp, a Russian-built Illusion 76 is preparing for the 4-hour trip to New Delhi. On board are 27 passengers and 10 crew members. Although this airline is on the brink of bankruptcy, it's keeping itself alive by flying charter flights like the one planned for today. 27 merchants from the neighboring country of Kyrgyzstan have paid for this jet to take them to Delhi, buy Indian textiles, and to bring them back home to sell at a profit. It's not a glamorous journey, but it keeps the airline afloat. At 3:55 p.m. Indian time, the 4-engine giant rumbles down the runway and lifts into the Kazakh sky. In Delhi, at the same time, a Saudi 747 lands from Jeddah. And by 6 p.m., it will depart again, packed with blue-collared Indian laborers heading back to the Gulf to keep their families afloat. Although these two flights have very different paths, in a way, they carry the same story. People leaving home, chasing a living in distant lands. And neither knows it yet, but their paths are about to cross. And the skies over Delhi will never be the same again. The flight from Shymkent to Delhi isn't very long, just about 3.5 hours, roughly the same as flying from Chicago to Los Angeles. The Illusion is cruising smoothly at 33,000 feet. So far, everything is routine. 2 hours into the flight, the Illusion approaches Delhi. They are entering one of the most complex airspaces in the region, where every altitude and every instruction matters. At 6:23 p.m., the plane reaches a waypoint called Lanka. The crew calls Delhi Approach, requesting clearance to begin their descent.
Delhi Approach, Kazakh 1907 at waypoint Lanka at flight level 250.
Delhi Approach clears them down to 20,000 feet.
Kazakh 1907, descend and maintain flight level 200.
And at that very same moment in Delhi, a Saudi Arabian Boeing 747 is preparing for departure. The jumbo jet is bound for Jeddah with a scheduled stop in Tehran. On board are 32 crew members and 289 passengers, many of them Indian laborers heading to the Gulf to provide for families back home. Boarding is complete and the doors are sealed, and the controller's voice cuts through.
Saudi 763, pushback approved.
At the controls is Captain Khalid Al-Shabaili. He is 44 and a Saudi national with nearly 10,000 hours in the air. Beside him sits an American first officer, 39-year-old Nazir Khan. And behind them is the 36-year-old flight engineer, Ahmed Idris. Like their Kazakh counterparts, they are also a seasoned crew, deeply familiar with the Boeing 747 and with the quirks of the tricky skies above Delhi. They've had over 70 hours of rest before this flight, and by every standard, they are fit, alert, and ready to fly. At 6:33 p.m.,
Saudi 763, cleared for takeoff.
the 4 engines roar to life. The massive jet accelerates down runway 28, slicing through the evening haze, and climbs into the cloud-covered Delhi skies. As the 747 climbs, the Kazakh Illusion is just 60 miles away, descending towards Delhi. And they are both being guided by the same voice. Approach controller VK Dutta. VK Dutta is 43 years old. He is an experienced mid-level controller at Delhi's airport. But in 1996, India had no formal licensing system for air traffic controllers. Most learned the craft through on-the-job training and experience. And right now, he's having a busy night. He has 5 planes demanding his immediate attention. The Saudi 747 that's climbing out of Delhi, the inbound Kazakh Illusion, 2 other domestic flights that are already airborne, and an inbound U.S. Air Force plane that's descending into Delhi. But Dutta's biggest challenge isn't the number of aircraft, it's the Delhi airspace itself. In '96, Delhi was an anomaly. Unlike major airports around the world, which had separate corridors for arrivals and departures, Delhi had just one corridor for both. The skies surrounding Delhi were mostly under military control. India's defense policy prioritized military airspaces, and commercial flights were allocated just a single highway in the sky called Gulf 452. Although the volume of commercial flights was increasing in the country, all that additional traffic had to squeeze into the same existing single highway. And at one end of that highway is the waypoint Lunka, where the Kazakh plane is at right now. At the other end, just entering the route, is the Saudi 747. The Saudi crew check in with Dutta.
Delhi approached Saudia 763, climbing through flight level 080 for 100.
Saudi 763, roger, in a contract. Climb to flight level 100.
The Kazakh plane, at this time, is at 23,000 feet and they're descending down to 18,000 feet. Dutta gives them updated instructions.
Kazakh 1907, descend flight level 150, report reaching. 150, Kazakh 1907.
Keep this call in mind, because what's said and what's understood will soon become critical. Barely a minute passes, and the Saudi jet reaches 10,000 feet that they were cleared to.
Delhi approached Saudia 763 at flight level 100.
Saudi 763, roger, climb and maintain flight level 140.
Now, the stage for the disaster is set. Both the Saudi jet and the Kazakh plane are flying head-on Route 452. The 747 is at 10,000 feet, and they've been cleared to 14,000 feet. The Kazakh Illusion is 50 miles away at 20,000 feet, cleared to descend down to 15,000 feet. Dutta's plan is simple. He plans to let them cross each other with 1,000 feet of vertical separation, and to then let them proceed with their journeys. You'd think that with aircraft flying this close to each other, Dutta would have a modern radar, one that shows altitude, speed, and even proximity warnings. But he doesn't. What he has is just an outdated primary radar, a radar that shows each plane as a glowing dot on his screen. He doesn't have altitude or distance information. The only way for him to know at what altitude the planes are flying is by literally asking the pilots to tell him. And if someone makes a mistake, there's no second line of defense. Right now, on Dutta's screen, he can see the dots of the Saudi plane and the Kazakh plane inch closer to each other. As long as they stay 1,000 feet apart, they'll pass over each other safely. But until now, he hasn't told either plane that another jet is nearby. And with outdated tools, even small errors can have catastrophic consequences. Delhi ATC is facing the same challenge that many businesses face day to day with many moving parts. We are now on the ground at the crash site. Investigators begin piecing the story together from the debris. They soon recover the black boxes from both the planes. But because India didn't have the technology to decode these black boxes, the Kazakh recorder was sent to Moscow and the Saudi recorder was sent to London to be read. While those tapes are being analyzed, investigators begin combing through the wreckage field. The wreckage stretches for over 7 kilometers across the Haryana farmlands. And amid the debris, they find their first clue. They recover the tail section of the Kazakh plane at the very start of the wreckage field. And that tells a story. For the tail section to be at the start of the trail, it can only mean that the tail section broke off first, right at the moment of impact. But the Illusion has a high tail design, and according to ATC instructions, the Kazakh plane was supposed to pass above the Saudi jet. For the tail to be the first point of contact means that for some reason, the Kazakh plane was lower than it should have been. Which raises the question, did the Kazakh crew descend too far? Or did the Saudi jet climb too high? Or did ATC give them both incorrect instructions? Until the black box recordings return from Moscow and London, investigators can't know for sure. But they have one crucial piece of evidence with them already: the ATC transmissions recorded in the control tower in Delhi. We are now back at 6:37 p.m. It's been 1 minute since we last heard from the crews. The Kazakh plane is descending down to 15,000 feet, and the Saudi plane is climbing to 14,000 feet. It is now 3 minutes to impact. Inside the tower, VK Dutta is watching his radar. The Kazakh crew reaches out requesting permission to go lower.
Delhi approach Kazakh 1907 at 170 for 150.
Kazakh 1907, Roger, maintain flight level 150.
And about 30 seconds later, the Saudi crew calls in requesting permission to go higher.
Delhi approach Saudi 763 at flight level 140 requesting 200.
Saudi 763, maintain flight level 140, stand by for higher.
With these clearances, the Saudi jet will safely pass 1,000 feet below the Kazakh jet. Dutta makes a note of these clearances on strips of paper near him. That's all the automation that he has for today. The two blips continue to move towards each other. He knows that they are close, but doesn't know what altitude they are at, so he checks in with the crew again.
Kazakh 1907, how far from Delhi are you?
Now reached flight level 150, 46 miles from Delhi on the 270 radial.
Kazakh has just reported reaching 15,000 feet, but later, investigators will reveal that the plane at this point was actually at 16,400 feet. Dutta, of course, wouldn't have known that. He accepts the report and continues.
Roger, maintain flight level 150, traffic 12 o'clock reciprocal, Saudi Boeing 747 at 10 miles, likely to cross in another 5 miles, report in sight.
This is the first time that either crew is told that there's another aircraft nearby. Inside the Kazakh cockpit, there's a pause. Voices can be heard in the background. The crew are discussing the traffic in Russian, trying to locate it visually. There's a long silence.
Kazakh 1907 report how many miles?
Traffic is at 8 miles, level 140.
Okay, now looking. Kazakh 1907.
This is the last transmission ever heard from Kazakh 1907. The blips continue to close in. Dutta turns his attention to the Saudi jet.
Saudi 763, traffic 12 o'clock reciprocal, Kazakh Illusion 76 at 6 miles, likely to cross in another 3 miles, report in sight.
Looking for traffic Saudi 763.
This is the last transmission from the Saudi jet. There's nothing more for Dutta to do. It's 1 minute to impact. When investigators review the tapes, they find no errors on Dutta's actions. With his primitive radar, he had no way of verifying the plane's actual altitudes. He did everything by the book. Investigators are so confident in his performance that Dutta is allowed to return to duty just 3 days after the crash. With Dutta being cleared, that leaves just 2 possibilities. Something went wrong in the Kazakh cockpit, or something went wrong in the Saudi one. In the wreckage field, the investigators locate the altimeters of the Kazakh plane, and what they see only deepens the mystery. The Kazakh plane had 4 different altimeters, and each of the 4 altimeters showed a different altitude. The captain's barometric altimeter showed 16,700 feet. His electronic altimeter showed 14,560 feet. The first officer's altimeter showed 14,895 feet, and the navigator's showed 1,720 feet. 4 altimeters, 4 numbers, none of them the same. Let's assume that the 1,720 feet reading is due to the impact. Remember that the Saudi plane was cleared to fly at 14,000 feet. Every other reading on these altimeters are above 14,000 feet. But we already know, from the tail being found at the start of the wreckage, that the Kazakh plane was below the Saudi plane at the point of impact. So, this could only mean that the Saudi plane climbed above their cleared altitude of 14,000 feet. 2 weeks later, the black box data arrives and confuses the investigators even further. Although the primary suspects right now are the Saudi crew, the flight data recorder from the Saudi plane paints a very different picture. The data shows that the Saudi plane had a smooth, uneventful climb up to 14,000 feet.
Saudi 763 will maintain 140.
The pilots then pulled the throttles back and they leveled the plane off at 14,108 feet. The 747 was exactly where they were told to be. The Kazakh data, on the other hand, was baffling. In stark contrast to the Saudi graph, The Kazakh altitude graph looked like a staircase pattern. It showed the plane holding steady for a few seconds, and then a sudden drop. Steady again for a few seconds, and then a sudden drop. This was nothing like what the investigators had seen before. Just what exactly was happening in this cockpit? The Ilyushin 76 was originally built for Soviet military use, and so it had a 5-person cockpit, with dedicated members to handle navigation and the radio so that the pilots could focus solely on flying. In the cockpit today are Captain Alexander Sharapanov, First Officer Emmerich Zhangarov, Flight Engineer Alexander Chuprov, Radio Operator Igor Rep, and on the lower deck, Navigator Zahanbek Apabov. But more people in the cockpit doesn't always mean better flying. In this cockpit, only Igor Rep, the radio operator, spoke enough English to handle ATC calls. All the other 4 members, including the pilots flying, only spoke Russian. So, every ATC clearance that they received had to be translated into Russian and then relayed to the pilots and the navigator. They essentially were playing Russian whispers inside the cockpit. And that wasn't the only translation that was going on inside the plane. The Ilyushin, like all Soviet airplanes, was originally designed to be an all-metric plane. Unlike Western airplanes that measured altitude in feet, the Ilyushin measured altitude in meters. To be able to fly outside Russia, though, 2 of the 4 altimeters were retrofitted to measure the altitude in feet. But importantly, the altimeter in front of the first officer, who was flying the plane, was still using meters. So the navigator had to translate every ATC clearance from feet to meters and relay it to the first officer. Inside this crowded cockpit, confusion was almost inevitable. Let's rejoin the plane 4 minutes before the crash, as the radio operator informs ATC that they have reached 15,000 feet.
Delhi approach Kazakh 1907, now reach flight level 150, 46 miles from Delhi on the 270 radial.
Although he claims they are at 15,000 feet, the flight data recorder will show that they were really at 16,400 feet. So why did he give an incorrect reading? We can't know for sure. But the radio operator does not have an altimeter in front of him. He'd only be able to see the first officer's altimeter by awkwardly looking around the first officer. It is possible that he either just assumed that they had reached 15,000 feet, or he incorrectly converted from metric to feet. It is also possible that he misunderstood the words reached and approaching, which might have added to the confusion. Either way, ATC Dutta takes the information at face value and issues the next instruction with information about the Saudi plane.
Roger, maintain flight level 150, traffic 12 o'clock, reciprocal Saudi Boeing 747, 10 miles at 14,000 feet, likely to cross in another 5 miles, report in sight.
All planes on Dutta's frequency would have been able to hear each other, so the Kazakh plane would have heard all the transmissions between Dutta and the Saudi plane so far. So they should have expected the Saudi plane to be there. But inside the Kazakh cockpit, you can hear confusion. The crew discussing the traffic in Russian, trying to visualize where the other plane is. After a long silence, Rep asks again,
Kazakh 1907, report how many miles?
Traffic is at 8 miles, level 140.
Now looking, Kazakh 1907.
At that moment, the plane finally passes through 15,000 feet, its assigned altitude. It should level off here. The Saudi jet is just 900 feet below them, closing in fast from the opposite direction. But the Kazakh Ilyushin doesn't stop. It keeps descending. For 30 long seconds, no one says a word and the altimeter spins down. 14,800 feet, 14,600 feet, 14,400 feet. Outside, the sky is overcast and the plane slips into a large white cloud. The Saudi 747 enters the same cloud from the opposite direction. 10 seconds to disaster. At 6:40, a sudden voice breaks through the noise inside the Kazakh cockpit. It's Igor Rep, the radio operator, shouting, "Hold the level!" He's finally seen it. The altimeter. They're too low. But instead of immediately leveling off, Captain Sharapanov hesitates.
What level were we given?
The captain is unsure about the cleared altitude. Flight engineer Chuprov, who's been silent until now, blurts out,
Maintain!
without saying what level they are supposed to be maintaining. Only Rep knows what it means.
The level 150, don't descend!
Panic hits. Sharapnarov realizes the mistake. He slams the autopilot disconnect and calls for more power to the flight engineer. The engines spool up, screaming. Rep shouts again, his voice trembling.
Get to 150, because on the 140, dead one!
In that instant, he must have seen it, a flash through the clouds. The massive 747 charging straight towards them. There's no time. The Illusion 76 slams into the Boeing 747 with unimaginable force. A heartbeat later, the 747's horizontal stabilizer slices through the Illusion's tail, shearing it clean off. For a brief, horrifying moment, the two giants are locked together inside a blazing fireball, and then break apart, spiraling downwards from 14,000 feet. Debris rains over the villages below. The sky burns orange. Inside Delhi Approach Control, VK Dutta watches in disbelief as the two blips merge on his radar and then fail to separate, and then disappear altogether. Seconds later, his radio crackles. A desperate voice screams in Arabic,
Astaghfirullah, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah.
God grant forgiveness. I witness no other God but Allah. Dutta calls again, and again, and again. No one responds. In the weeks after the disaster, the Indian government convened a board of inquiry led by Justice R.C. Lahoti. There were two questions that needed to be answered. Why did the Kazakh plane keep descending? And why did the data recorder show a step-like pattern? The Lahoti report concluded that although the radio operator acknowledged the clearance to maintain 15,000 feet, the first officer, who was flying the plane, may have misheard the phrase 14,000, referring to the altitude of the Saudi aircraft as the new instruction for them to descend further. The report claims a tragic language misinterpretation caused the crash. The investigators concluded that the staircase pattern was due to a faulty sensor rather than turbulence, and they set that theory aside. As a direct aftermath of this crash, Kazakhstan Airlines, which was already on the brink of bankruptcy, ceased operations, and its assets were transferred to the newly formed Air Kazakhstan, which itself again went bankrupt in 2004 and then became Air Astana, which is still flying today. Following the accident, the Indian government revealed that there had been 10 recent near misses in India's skies, mostly involving airlines from former Soviet nations, and many of these problems were blamed on the pilots' poor understanding of English. Indian ATC personnel also went on strike, demanding formal licensing and improved training. They also demanded the creation of new civilian corridors around Delhi to make the Delhi skies safer. India also petitioned the ICAO that Level 4 English proficiency be mandated for pilots and air traffic controllers across the world, which was later internationally adopted. India also became the second nation internationally, after the US, to mandate the use of TCAS, the Traffic Collision Avoidance System, in its skies. But the worst part is, many of the victims' bodies were never identified, and some of them came from such deeply poverty-stricken rural backwaters that their next of kin were never identified either. Somewhere out there are almost certainly families who have no idea that their missing brother, sister, son, or daughter died aboard Saudi Arabian Flight 763. For all they know, their loved ones simply went away and never came back.